Hello, and welcome to Story Hour with Miss Barbara. Today I would like to share a story with you from my good friend Duncan Williamson, a Christmas story from his book, The Coming of the Unicorn. And this story is called The Miser's Gold. First, let's light the story candle. Fire, bears bright, show to us your golden light. Long ago, in a small village, there lived a poor widow, and she had just one child. And this widow tried her best to make a living for herself and her child. She took in washing and ironing and sewing. And so she scraped together what she could. But it came to a time where she just couldn't find any work. And this was the day before Christmas, when it all came to a head. She searched the house high and low, and there was not a crumb to be found. And she just sat down and wept. And her little child, who was just a little girl, 3 years old, came to her and said, "Why are you crying, Mommy?" And she said, "Oh, it's just not fair. Here it is, Christmas Eve, and I don't even have any food to give you. What more, a present? And all the people in the village are getting ready to celebrate with their beautiful Christmas parties and their feasts, and we have nothing." And she just wept. But being a resourceful person, she thought, there must be something I could do. I'll go out into the streets and see if I can round up a friend, somebody from the past who will care enough to give me something for Christmas, or at least lend me some money so that I can just buy a wee little present for my. But as it was getting to be late afternoon and it was a cold winter's day, she decided not to take her little girl with her. And she said to her, "Now, honey, I want you just to stay here by the fire." And she built it up for her. "And Mommy's just going to go out down the street and see what she can find, and she'll be right back. So you stay here." And so the sweet little girl obediently sat down by the fire and waited for her mommy. Well, the poor widow went out into the streets and searched high and low, but everyone was behind closed doors getting ready for their celebrations, and she couldn't find a soul, no one that would share anything with her. And several hours went by. Well, by this time, the little girl was getting bored, sitting there waiting for her mommy, and the fire was starting to burn low, and it was getting dark in the house. So she decided to get up and go find her mommy. Now, this little girl was just the loveliest little thing. She had golden curls tumbling down. And so she went outside and she went down the street, but it was snowing, and she soon had lost her way. But then she saw a light in a window, and the door was open. So she went inside, and there was a fire burning in the hearth with um, a little rug sitting on the front of the fireplace, a little bearskin rug. And so she sat down on that rug. The rest of the room was bare, just one table, one chair. And as she was sitting there and waiting, crying for her mommy, she laid her head down and she fell asleep. Well, she didn't know it, but that house belonged to the village miser. And he was terribly tight with his money, just getting any penny he can and never letting anything out. Well, just about that time, the miser came home and the fire had started to burn low, and the dying firelight was glinting off of the child's golden curls as she lay there. And the miser thought, "Oh, my gold! Someone has been in here and has gotten into my gold and strewn it all over that little carpet." And he ran to grab his gold. Instead, he just reached into the strands of hair of this little girl. And he was so surprised. So he bent down and picked up the child. And in her sleep, she reached out her two little arms and wrapped them around him, thinking it was her mommy. And it just melted his heart. So, with one arm around the little child, he built up the fire and got it nice and warm. And he sat down in the rocking chair and he rocked the baby for like an hour. And he was just feeling the most comforted and warm feeling he had ever experienced. And after a while, he started to think, whose little child this could be? And he thought, oh, it's the widow woman down the street in the village. So he took the little baby in arms and he went out his door and down the street and he went to knock on the widow's door. Meanwhile, the widow had come home and found her child missing. And not only had she not been able to get anything for Christmas, now her little baby was gone. It was just too much. And just then, when she heard the knock at the door, she thought, oh, please let it be someone with news of my baby. And so she opened the door, and there was the miser. She remembered seeing him in the village. And sure enough, he was holding her baby girl. And she took her baby in her arms with such joy, she could have kissed that miser. And she said, oh, I've been searching high and low for something for the baby, and no one would help me. And I'm totally alone. And now I'm just so happy that you have brought her back. So then the miser's heart was touched. He didn't even want to let go of the baby. So he said, you wait here. I'll be right back. I'm going to go get something. So he ran out the door and he ran all the way home, ran in the house, didn't even shut the door, went straight to his hidden place where he kept his money, pulled out his box and stuffed his pockets full of coins. And then he went searching for the biggest store he could find. And luckily there was one just about to close, but it was still open. So he went inside and said, I want to buy. And this surprised the shop owner because he knew the miser and he had never known him to want to buy before. And he just looked at the miser and thought, there's something strange about him. His eyes are shining. They're not miserable looking like usual. And then the shopkeeper started wondering, well, is he really going to pay for all this? I've never known for him to spend any money. But he had his pockets full of gold, and he wanted to buy. He was ready to buy out the shop. And so he filled his box full that he had to carry on his shoulders. It was so heavy. And he went back to the widow's house. And he came inside and put the box on the table and told her to build up the fire. We're going to have a party tonight. And he took out all kinds of food and he said, now here, you take this and make a nice supper for us. And then he took the little child on his lap and gave her some candy that he had bought. So the widow was able to make a wonderful Christmas dinner for Christmas Eve. And they sat and talked and had a wonderful evening. And then they put the baby to bed, and the miser took out a big stocking he had bought, and he filled it with all kinds of toys and treats for the little child and hung it up. And the widow said, I had nothing and no one. But the miser said, well, now you have a friend. And the next day they celebrated the most wonderful Christmas day that either of them had ever experienced. And not long after that, the miser married the widow, and they were able to share in their abundance after that for the rest of their days. And so ends my little story of the miser's gold. Let's blow out the story candle. And thanks for listening.